Alright guys, welcome to the Monday Directions video. Today we just got some notes to go through. As you can see here, we're going to talk about the Constitutional Convention and kind of the creating of the Constitution. Now, so far we've talked about the Articles of Confederation, the first attempt to organize the government. Now, that wasn't working, but people were trying to change it. And then we had Shays' Rebellion that really showcased all the weaknesses that the Articles of Confederation puts on our federal government. So after Shays' Rebellion, that was kind of the big aha moment where a lot of people were like, yep, we need to change these. Okay, so their whole goal is to meet and change or amend the Articles of Confederation. But as we kind of go through the changing process, we just figured that it's more likely that we're just going to throw out the Articles of Confederation, and try something totally new, which will end up becoming the Constitution. So let's kind of go through this. Everything in red is kind of the important stuff. Okay, so the Constitutional Convention, 1787. Okay, it's closed, not open to public, meeting between the delegates from 13 states. The meeting took place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We want to know where it took place. That'll be a quiz question. So we want to know that it takes place in Philadelphia on May 25th and September 17, 1787. The whole idea is to plan to get together to amend or to change the Articles. And it was met at Constitutional Hall there in Pennsylvania. Results, delegates decided to scrap the Articles of Confederation and develop a new form of government. It was a very long process, and so they decided to scrap the Articles and develop a new form. It was a very long process, which required a lot of compromises between the states. George Washington was nominated to be the president of the convention. James Madison took very careful notes, and we want to know that James Madison is the note taker. So I'm going to do this real quick. We do want this one. So James Madison is kind of taking notes, and because of his notes, historians have a really good idea of what happened during that time. Major arguments during the convention. The main argument was representation of large states and small states, and how can we make it equal. So large and small states argued over how their state would be represented. Large population states that had a lot of people in it, felt that they should have more power, have more voting power. Where small population states felt that they should have equal power or equal voting rights. So two plans get proposed. The debates over the issue of representation got so heated, the convention was almost ended. So this is like one of the major sticking points in the convention. So we have the big states that want to have more voting power because they have more people, and then the smaller states are kind of saying, well, that shouldn't matter. We're each a state. We should all have equal votes. All right, so the first plan that gets proposed in this whole issue is called the Virginia Plan, and the Virginia Plan favored the large states like Virginia. Okay, each state would be given a number of votes and delegates based on their state's population, and again, this is proposed by James Madison of Virginia. So he's saying, yeah, we should just vote, or we should have voting power based on our population. So it looks something like this. Smaller states like Massachusetts may have this much, or these many representatives based on their population, but bigger states like Virginia would have a lot more delegates. All right, so that one obviously, big states loved it, smaller states did not. So the smaller states came up with their own plan called the New Jersey Plan, which is going to be favored by the small states. Each state would be given the same number of votes, regardless of their population. This was proposed by William Paterson of New Jersey. So this plan, again, each state, no matter how big or how small, would have equal representation inside the government. Well, the solution it's called the Great Compromise. We want to know that. The Great Compromise is using parts of both the Virginia and the New Jersey Plan. Now, the Great Compromise also sets up what we call a bicameral legislature, which means you have two houses. So for us in our government now, we have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. The House of Representatives is where your representations is based on your population, aka the Virginia Plan, and the Senate is equal representation, so each state gets 2 senators. So now we have equal representation, thus we have the New Jersey Plan. So we just use both. Genius idea, and it kind of saves the convention. So result, the Senate would be the small states, the House of Reps would be the large states, 2 senators per state, regardless of population, 100 senators total, and again, the House of Representatives is based on population, so that number is always kind of changing and adjusting. All right. Slavery was another big issue. Some delegates from northern states wanted to abolish or end the slave trade and slavery. Many delegates from the southern states threatened to leave the Union if the slave trade or slavery was abolished in the United States. So again, this is just more of a precursor to what's going to become the Civil War. The South, they really didn't want to give up slavery because their whole livelihood was built on farming, and having slaves work for them obviously increases their profit immensely. You know, it's always going to make you more money if you don't got to pay your workforce. So the issue gets solved. The word slavery does not appear in the Constitution, even though many people thought it should. Delegates agreed that the slave trade would not be discussed in Congress until 1808. So basically, they're like, yeah, that's future us problem. $10 tax will be placed on the importation of each slave. Runaway slaves will be returned to the state of slavery. Slavery was formally abolished in ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865. So from 1808 to 1865, obviously slavery becomes the hot topic in America. Obviously, we fight a major war over it with each other. Deadliest war in American history because everybody who died was American. So, you know, more deaths than World War II combined, more deaths than World War I, Vietnam, all those. So representation of slave populations. This is another issue, okay? Southern states wanted to count their slaves' population towards representation. Southern states would get more delegates in the House of Representatives and have more electoral votes for the presidency. Northern states did not want the slave population counted. So obviously, the southern states said, yeah, these slave states should be, or these slaves should count towards our population. They live here, they should count. And the northern states were saying, well, no, technically, they're slaves, they're property, they're not people. They shouldn't count towards your state's population because obviously the more people you have in the House of Representatives, the more voting power you get, the more votes go your way. So the compromise here, it's called the 3/5 compromise. Every 5 slaves counted as free people for both taxation and representation. So without the 3/5 compromise, Thomas Jefferson would not have won the election in 1800. Okay, so we just want to know that the 3/5 compromise it's a little bit of advantage to the South for counting slaves, and that little bit of advantage is all we needed to sway the election of 1800. Because without it, Thomas Jefferson would not have been president. But with it, he wins, and then history's kind of changed forever. So the 3/5 compromise and the Great Compromise are the two compromises we have to know. Again, you can kind of see that there. Ratification of the Constitution. You needed 9 of the 13 states had to ratify or accept the Constitution before it became law. 2 groups fought over this issue. So now, once we kind of got through all the sticking points in the Constitution, they kind of had their draft done, and they kind of released it out to the public. You know, it's kind of, hey, go back to your states, talk with it amongst your state government, and then let us know if you accept or if you don't accept. If they don't accept, we have to go back to the drawing board. So there's kind of some leeway, some time between the Constitution and when it's going to be voted on or accepted. So 2 groups kind of form over this. We get the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists want to accept or approve it, and the Anti-Federalists are telling people, no, this is bad, this is a bad thing, don't sign it, don't ratify, don't accept it. So the Anti-Federalists, we want to know some things about them. They'll be on the quiz, so jot this down. Oppose the new Constitution, believe the Constitution would create too strong of a central or federal government that would threaten individual freedom. They wanted individual freedoms like the Bill of Rights to be outlined in the Constitution. Anti-Federalists were supposed to be men like Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, and George Clinton, New York's first governor. But many Anti-Federalists come from southern states. So Anti-Federalists would be like southern farmers for the most part, who are more independent and just don't want interference from anybody else besides what they're doing. And on the other side of the coin, we have the Federalists, people who supported the new Constitution. They argued that a much stronger central government was needed to preserve the United States, believed the U.S. would not survive on the Articles of Confederation. And what they would do is they released these things called the Federalist Papers. Kind of like short essays, kind of like Common Sense or the American Crises. And it's just basically laying out arguments on why we should accept the Constitution. So a series of essays written in favor of the Constitution that were printed around the country. Federalist Papers were written by James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. So you want to know these guys' names. You want to know these 3 individuals. They are very important to us. So let's jot that down. Federalists were written by James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. Many are educated Northerners that work in business, we'll say. So we got our three main guys there. And again, if you just want to jot this chart down, you can. It makes it kind of easy for the quiz. Same thing for this chart too, if you would like to jot it down. At the end of the day, between all the whole Federalists and Anti-Federalists and the debates within the states, eventually the Constitution was ratified. 13 of the 13 states delegates ratified the Constitution. The delegates had to get approval from their own state's legislature to approve it. That's what happened. The preamble, which is the introduction, clearly states where the power to govern came from, we the people. So basically the preamble, just letting people know, like the introduction. The results, it took almost 2.5 years for all 13 states to ratify the Constitution. Many delegates believe that a Bill of Rights needed to be added to the Constitution to protect individual rights, liberties, and properties. And for us, we have the Bill of Rights. We just want to know what's the first 10 amendments. This is a quiz question. What is the Bill of Rights? And the Bill of Rights is just the first 10 amendments, basically laying out the rights that each person has living in America, right? Right to bear arms, right to free speech, right to assemble. All those 10, right, are the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights was also a key point when discussing the Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. This was another big sticking point, so we want to know that. And for us, once it gets ratified, it goes into effect, and we'll look at some of these things the rest of the week. We'll look at the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The first half of the week is kind of just looking at all these different groups and all these different people involved. And then the back end of the week, we'll actually look at the Constitution and kind of go through it on our own. But that's all I have, guys. Have a good Monday, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.